Tales of the Marvels Ruin presents an alternate version of the familiar Marvel Universe, where the world is gripped by tragedy and chaos. Instead of heroes flourishing and achieving greatness, the superpowered individuals we know are destroyed by the very same forces that gave them their abilities. The story is dark, gritty, and offers a twisted look at what might have been if the Marvel Universe went terribly wrong. Sheldon begins his first of many stories by reflecting on Tony Stark. In this universe, Stark's body is ravaged by radiation poisoning when escaping the cave because he doesn't treat the shrapnel in his heart. Instead of inventing the Iron Man to save his life, his armor, which in the main continuity is a symbol of strength and heroism, becomes nothing more than a prison that barely keeps his deteriorating body alive. After a few days, Phil enters a local bar where he reads the newspaper about a young daredevil, Matthew Murdock, being killed by the very same truck that blinded him and gave him his extraordinary instincts. After making a snarky remark about the condition of the bar, he asks the bartender for a glass of OJ. Phil is startled by a man threatening him. Wolverine, one of the most resilient and iconic mutants, is no longer the fierce warrior of the Marvel Universe. His healing factor failed him, and now his body is a decaying shell, his metal claws rusting within him. We get a short glimpse of the Avengers' fate. T'Challa joins the Black Panther movement and is sent to jail. Hawkeye was murdered in cold blood, and Iron Man is a renowned serial killer on the run. A nuclear base in the middle of nowhere is a testing ground for cancerous Kree. The Kree had no choice but to land on Earth due to Silver Surfer ripping himself apart from the inside out, because he felt like he couldn't breathe. The unnatural amount of cosmic power interfered with the Kree's cloaking device, causing Earth to detect and shoot them down, forcing them to be captured and tortured, giving no hope for their race. Sheldon is wandering the drug-ravaged Washington, D.C., once a symbol of the American dream, now a desolate wasteland filled with agony and suffering. But Phil isn't here to stand around. He is looking to interview Nick Fury as one of his stories. After meeting with Nick questions why he is here. Sheldon replies, "I'm writing a book," where he is met with a gut punch. You see, in this universe, the legacy of Nick Fury, who in the regular universe is a master strategist and leader of S.H.I.E.L.D., is tarnished here. Fury is a war criminal responsible for the deaths of countless superhumans in a failed attempt to contain the growing chaos. The idea of superheroes working for the greater good is a distant memory, replaced by brutal government control and corporate greed. He takes the writing book the wrong way, thinking Phil is writing about the traitor allegations. Nick Fury agrees and takes the interview, where he says that he knew Captain America and Steve is the one who introduced Nick to eating human meat. Unexpectedly, Jean Grey is looking for some extra cash but is shot down by Nick. After this, he tells Phil that the only way to survive in this world is by being a mutant, and that there is no room for good people anymore, right before turning the gun to his head, telling us he's clean, and firing, killing himself. Galactus, the all-powerful cosmic entity, meets an even more pathetic fate. In this world, instead of being a towering force of destruction, Galactus is found dead, floating lifelessly in space. Next interview, Phil interviews Rick Jones, former best friend of Bruce Banner, where he is wallowing in self-pity and overdosing himself with morphine to ease his pain. You see, Bruce Banner, the man who would have become the Hulk in any other world, after pushing Rick out of the way, in this universe, when Bruce was hit by the gamma rays, his body grotesquely mutated. Rather than transforming into the powerful Green Hulk, instead of a hero who fights for justice, Bruce is a deformed monster, barely recognizable as human. His skin is covered in cancerous growths, and he lives in constant agony. The Hulk in ruins represents not strength, but unbearable suffering. Rick Jones explains that Bruce Banner is not dead, but is being experimented on by the government, which shows how truly messed up this universe really is. After leaving the apartment, Phil is left with the Punisher on the floor, gunned down. He expresses his feelings of death, and death is all around him, and death is in his bones, in his veins, in his tissue, that he can almost taste death, but that he doesn't want to die, but tell the story of what could have been. On a plane leaving Chicago, Sheldon encounters a mentally ill Mystique who developed a personality disorder due to shapeshifting so much, where she slowly kills herself by mutating all of her body into different things. When he lands, a government official bumps into a man who is none other than this universe's Magneto. You see, instead of learning to control his power, he tries to contain it with devices, but after he gets knocked down, it breaks, causing the slightest hint of iron or metal to rush towards him. Started off as metal fillings and paper clips, gradually got more intense to pulling iron out of people's body, and soon enough, a plane crashing into him, killing everyone in the vicinity. But Phil managed to escape. X-Men's dream of peaceful coexistence between mutants and humans is dead. Mutants are hunted down, and instead of leading a revolution, Charles Xavier is a crippled and twisted president, his mind destroyed by the very powers he sought to control. Cyclops' eyes melted shut, Nightcrawler eats himself to stay alive, Kitty Pryde loses her intestines in a failed escape attempt, Quicksilver's limbs are completely cut off to prevent him from running. Instead of helping the mutants, Professor X mocks them, tortures them, giving them the same torture as the government does the Kree soldiers. He carries on with his interviews, where in this universe, Thor is not a god of thunder, but a mentally unstable doctor named Donald Blake that has succumbed to drugs and a cult where they believe Thor exists. Below is Emma Frost, where she adopts autistic children and does experiments on them to bring out their psychic abilities. Johnny Blaze, also known as Ghost Rider, is on the list. In this universe, Ghost Rider is just a stunt driver who lights his head on fire. However, this time it would take a turn for the worst as he engulfs his whole head in flames, killing him. However, people at the event said he was driving around for hours while in flames. He goes to bed that night dreaming of what could have been, dreaming of Iron Man and Captain America as real superheroes, where he has to live with the devastating truth of reality that this will never happen. Next on the list, he interviews Ben Grimm to ask him about the Fantastic Four, or what could have been. Ben Grimm and Reed Richards were developing a spacecraft that could travel into deep space and study cosmic power called the Astrea. But they were running out of time building and cut it short, taking as many shortcuts as they can. Reed Richards was being impatient with the government, insisting that the Astrea was done already. After being refused permission to fly the craft, he turned to Ben and said, "Let's just steal it," where Ben refused, which led Reed to turn to Victor Von Doom. The spacecraft attracted so much cosmic energy that it transformed their bodies into lifeless corpses. That was it. That was the last interview Phil had done, and he came up with the perfect name for his book, Marvels. But in this world, nothing is expected. Because of Peter Parker, Phil won't live to write the book. Phil Sheldon discovers Peter Parker was bit by the radioactive spider. In this universe, the spider that bit him gave him a horrible infection, which caused his body to deteriorate rapidly. Instead of swinging through New York's skyscrapers, Spider-Man's power brought him a slow and painful death. His skin became riddled with lesions, his body covered in festering sores. The once heroic figure is now a symbol of suffering, a tragic reminder of what could have been. In this world, there's no web-slinging hero to save the day, only a young man whose life was cut short by the forces beyond his control. This virus is contagious, and Philip shook Peter's hand before the symptoms showed, and the virus that killed Peter Parker killed Phil, and without the pills he used to counteract the virus, he stood no chance. Succumbing to the disease, he was left to die in an alleyway, losing all of the work he worked so hard to find. The hope for Marvels and superheroes dies with him, leaving this world with nothing but ruins.